the Center for ADIVASI Research and Development.
Okay.
So Mr. Dr. Jenna, that is under the director of CARD, is the chair of the meeting, I would guess.
Okay, sir.
Dr. Jenna, are you going to become?
Yes,
are
yes,
you going to?
Sir, with collaboration with IIM Sambalpur, Ravenshaw University Cuttack. Ravenshaw has more than 150 years of history. And then, sir, Central University of Koraput. Central University of Koraput is now doing MOU with us to enhance leadership and skill development programs soon as possible. And Koraput, you know, probably one of the tribal capital of India. And now we are hosting you, sir. Sir, we'll start soon.
I visited Koraput. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Rudra, please.
Good evening and good afternoon from United Kingdom peoples, and good evening to India. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to World Human Sciences and Management Conference 2021 and 22. This is Rudra Narayan Das, Executive Director, Center for Adivasi Research and Development. We are proud to announce that this conference is conducted along with the Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, Koraput, and Ravenshaw University, Cuttack. I welcome our speaker for today, Professor Zuky Serper, and participants across the globe through Facebook and YouTube Live, and a few people are here to be with us. The broader theme of this conference is AGNOTOLOGICAL context, disciplinary practices of social sciences and policy frames. On behalf of the Center for Adivasi Research and Development, I extend my profound gratitude to our patrons, Professor Dr. Sanjay Kumar Naik, respected Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Professor Mahadev Joysul, Director, Indian Institute of Management, and Professor Sarath Kumar Palita, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha. The convener of this largest virtual conference, an eminent Indian historian, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, an eminent policy activist, writer, and philanthropist, Mr. Charudat Panigrahi. Ladies and gentlemen, the outcome of this conference is to come up with a national and international framework for the education system in future. The crux of this conference will be the use of digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality that is being increasingly adopted after the outbreak of COVID-19. We hope this conference would help students, faculties, researchers, and all to expand their mental horizon and help the education system to adopt the best in future. Dear friends, the Center for Adivasi Research and Development is a leading research-oriented institution promoting ethnographic, empirical, and evidence-based research for engaging and addressing the challenges that 21st century globe is facing today. The prime agenda of this institution is to come up with potential policy solutions for social change while believing in the idea of debate, dialogue, discussion, and with expertise, experiencing, and education. The institution focus on marginalized communities and work for their livelihood to protect their nature, culture, language, and identity in particular. The age of modernity has witnessed that change is the only constant phenomena for societal purpose to enhance the knowledge. Our information work for them is methodical and avoid paradoxically frameworks which is neglected so many centuries from theory to become practice. The Center for Adivasi Research and Development sincerely believes the concept of social marketing, which is seriously looking for non-profit marketing and builds new social entrepreneurship for check and balance mechanism to glorify generations to come. Center for Adivasi Research and Development come to serve with the holistic approach of critical thinking in education to fill the gaps and to plan accordingly for the voiceless community. Dear friends, in today's evening, we have with us Mr. Zuky Serper, one of the very famous activist, environmentalist, and artist. Professor Serper worked for Solidarity Group for Vedanta, using scholar, legal, and grassroots activism to support the rights of indigenous and farming communities on forest and land. Since visiting bauxite mines and aluminium processing sites near Niyamgiri in Odisha, India, Serper worked with colleague Professor Samarendra Das on environmental justice for communities affected by extractive industry and pollution. Serper is a visual artist and GIS analyst. His formal training is in GIS and environmental management in MSc University of Brinton in 2021 and PGCE in Institute of Education in UCL 2006 and art, MA Fine Art in Chalsa College of Art and Design in 2000. He studied satellite data sets for possible link between deforestation, mining, and local climate change. Zuky is a GIS practitioner and a resident GIS practitioner and a resident artist at the Center for World Environmental History at the University of Sussex. He used socially engaged art practices as environmental educator in London primary schools, and later when he's setting up CWEH Activism and Academia Forum while teaching in university art students. He was a part of the International Art Camp of Netherlands in 2018 and recently curated an art and education project of works exchange between Tesco Reserve, Ecuador and Sundarban communities of India to explore children's experience in the frontier of climate change, and the work were exhibited in the Jubilee Library in Brinton 2021. In today's symposia, Mr. Serper will deliver his talk on the power of GIS in environmental justice activism. So before inviting Mr. Serper, I would like to invite Mr. San Kashyap to go for a thematic introduction on today's topic. Over to you, San Kashyap.
Thank you. So we welcome Zuky Serper. I hope I pronounced the name correct. And it's such a pleasure to have him here. Just going through the profile briefly, I mean, the kind of very engaging work which he has done throughout the tribal heartlands of India, amidst Indian Adivasis, and the thematic presentation which is available on the website, which is of Vedanta's Billions, Regulatory Failure, and Environment and Human Rights. So all these like really make it a very important perspective. Some of us who are interested at Ravenshaw University in Anthropocene, it was very welcoming to see that he has contributed something called Contested Realities Adivasis in the Anthropocene. So we really hopefully look forward to a very insightful talk. And as the talk has been titled, The Power of GIS in Environmental Justice Activism, and hopefully a very engaging discussion after the talk ends. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Rayan Dash and Shan Kashyap. I think that all this long list of affiliations is probably a sign of my age, and I'm quite enlightened and happy to share my time with you lot that hopefully have another 30, 40, 50 years of activism ahead of them. So I'm going to move to share my screen of the PowerPoint. It will be easier because I would like to do I would like to have it as our basis for the discussion. Sorry. Okay, so what is GIS? I hope that everyone is familiar with the acronym of Geographic Information System, which is a fairly new science based on digital mapping, satellite and remote sensing mapping of the Earth. Now, there are depositories of information since 1972 with the American program of NASA or the USGS under the title of Landsat satellites. And later on, I'll show some photographs or images that were produced by this Lancet of the area we're talking about. The other part of the title is about grassroots activism. So we are really, in Foil Vedanta, we are really valuing the link of us privileged scholars, city dwellers, you know, we have the time, we have the money, we have the knowledge to actually share that knowledge with the people that could really do something with it. So we're not just studying for ourselves, we're not just improving our own mind, we're also trying to change in the same way that the first speaker was talking about. We're trying to improve, to make the world a better place, simply. And the third part is informed. So we really know, we have an experience of, by now, working with Samarendra Das since 2004. So we have quite a few years of experience what information can do in activism. So we bring the knowledge, the information that we have, that we acquired, to assist activists on the ground and be there. We want to be on the site of intervention of those places. And this is an amazing photograph that I'm going to return to at the end of my talk. This is a Dongria girl or young woman in a demonstration in 2013, holding a mobile phone, which is a sign of self-reflection and self-awareness in my interpretation. And it would be interesting to hear other people's views. So let's see, how do we move? Oh, yeah, okay. So a few terms that will be quite mentioned quite a lot in the talk. So bauxite. Bauxite is the ore that is the basis for production of aluminium. And the Niamgiri, our site of intervention with Foil Vedanta campaign, is a mountain range in basically mainly in Kalahandi district, but partly in Rayagada district in the state of Odisha, and has been a subject or the epicenter of this amazing campaign that saved the mountain. I don't think that many activists can actually tell you that they actually achieved such a huge achievement, like saving the whole range of mountain and the people that are living there, the communities. I also want to mention the Forest Rights Act of 2006, and recently Jairam Ramesh, that was sponsoring it and pushed it, said that it was one of his best achievements in government. So I think that we know that this is one of those laws, the act is really important to save and to protect the rights of Adivasi and other communities, not only Adivasi, also cow herders and peasant farmers on the land that have rights on forests. We're talking about a company, not because we are obsessed with it, but because we studied it. This is a case study of a company called Vedanta Resources. And this is a company that is a London-based company, or was a London-based company, Vedanta Resources Limited, that owns the site near Niamgiri, the Lanjigarh refinery that I'm going to talk about from the point of view of GIS, is a London-based company. It's not an Indian company. It's an Indian person that is the CEO and the owner, but it's not a London-based company. Now, another interesting detail is that the Controller General of the Indian Bureau of Mines in 2020 published this volume under the Indian mineral industry at a glance, and the latest one was 2017-2018, so the year 2017-2018. So 3,834 mining leases registered in India. I think it's about, well, I don't want to give a number that I'm not, I can't remember well, but about a third of it is to do with minerals. The rest is to do with other minerals, sand or rocks or granite and such. Now we are talking about a very lush mountain, and the Supreme Court of India, when it's ruled against mining it in 2013, after a very long process, 10 years of campaigning, says these words in its ruling. Needless to say, if the bauxite mining project, BMP, in any way affects their religious rights, especially their right to worship their deity, known as Niyam Raja, in the hills on top of the Niyamgiri range of hills, that right has to be preserved and protected. And indeed, this right has been protected since 2014. So this is the mountain. In 2004, when I visited, this is a photograph I've taken visiting near the site. You can see the mountain in the background. This is a new road and a new railway for the future mining of the Niyamgiri. As we know it, it didn't happen, but the roads have been already metalled in 2004. This is the factory, the refinery in Lanjiga. Lanjiga is about 5 kilometers north of the range of Niyamgiri. It's called VAL, Vedanta Alumina Refinery. And it's an interesting photograph from 2018 because it shows, you see on the left-hand side, there's a chimney with a crane next to it. And this is the unfinished expansion chimney. So the company applied to expand the refinery ever since it started, almost from 1 megaton per year to 6 megaton per year. It already started to build the expansion before it got the permission, before it got the clearing. So maybe it tells something about the way that operation of company is conducted. Now, an interesting description of Vedanta, it's taken actually from a report produced for Vedanta by Tata AIG Risk Management Services in 2002 and quoted later in this document that you see on the screen. And it says here that the refinery in the Kalahandi district has a captive coal power plant, but they failed to secure the Niyamgiri Hills bauxite. And the interesting thing for us here, that the project is supply of raw material to the refinery at a competitive price for about 23 to 25 years of the life of the project. So we are talking here about an intervention into a pristine area for 25 years, let's say. And then what? You go, you leave behind the destruction. What about the 12 villages that were grazed off the ground? What about the land contaminated? So there's no real, I would say, systemic thinking of what happened before and what's going to happen after. And I think this is something that us as scholars need to pay attention to and influence policymakers, because it's their responsibility to conduct. The landscape has been scarred by this conveyor belt, again, built before the permission to mine the Niyamgiri was given, allegedly to transport bauxite from the mountain. It has never been activated. It's just there as a sort of a dead reminder of the failed project of mining the Niyamgiri. In some way, it's a sign of victory, but look at the view of it in the middle of a jungle and green area. Okay, so you're probably familiar with the state of Odisha in the eastern coast of India, on the Indian Ocean. I'm going to concentrate on Kalahandi and Rayagada districts because the Niyamgiri is on the boundary of them both. Now, on the right-hand side, this reddish image is the first image seen from space that was produced of the Niyamgiri. And it's not complete because somehow the strip of scan was cut on the right-hand side here. But it is enough for us to see the whole range in the center of that image. So this is the Nyamgiri. Lanjigar is just here. Since it is from 1972, we can actually get a sense of how lush the area is. Now, usually when we talk about lush, we expect green color. It doesn't work like this in satellites. The main tool to actually measure the health of vegetation is the projection of red and infrared light. And what I did in this image, I brought the layers. If you imagine a layer of color, one on top of the other, I put the red and the infrared on top of each other and produce this image that accentuate the red color. Now, why is it so important? Red color is projected, reflected from healthy vegetation. So a vegetation in full photosynthesis would project the red light to protect itself. And this red light is captured on the sensors of the satellite and produce an image that can tell us what is the health of vegetation by the strength of the red color. So we can see how red the area of the Nyamgiri is. You can see it just here. It's quite obvious, but I just wanted to stress the point. This is another interesting image, and it's a tiny bit too big. I don't know if you can see the dates, but on the left-hand side, it's the same image that I showed you before from 1972, and my arrow is pointing to it. On the right-hand side, it's an image from 2021, January 2021, and this is called a true color image. That is basically taking the layers of the visible light and produce a color image of the site. You can clearly see the, let's call it a mango-shaped Nyamgiri, because I think it's quite like a mango. At the top of it, you can see a red dot here. This is the refinery. This is the exposed scar of the refinery on the landscape. And they were hoping to mine, with the Vedanta was hoping to mine the Nyamgiri and didn't get it. Didn't get permitted. So you can see a comparison here of two images, one from 1972, one from 2021, much more details of image. And we can get some ideas and conclusions from those images in terms of the geography and the climate. I'm going to talk about it in my next slides. Another detail that is missing from a lot of the literature, and I was quite actually surprised because a lot of my knowledge, I'll show you the books, a lot of my knowledge came from this book that is Out of This Earth, authored by Mr. Das and Mr. Padel. First edition 2010, second edition 2020, this is the one I'm holding here. In none of the editions, I could find the complete list of the villages that had to be cleared away, to make space for the refinery. You can see the refinery, it's from Google Earth. You can see the refinery here. On the left-hand side, I made the list of the villages, and I'm just going to move to the next slide, and you can see the villages list here. So I'm just going to read them, even if I'm not going to do it in the best accent, because I think it's quite important to remember that those 12 villages or their land had to be basically grazed off the ground. Families had to be moved. Huts had to be, or the mud houses and the self-built houses had to be demolished. And people were moved to a colony built of concrete away from their land. All this to make space for the refinery. And this is sort of externalities. So in all the calculations, maybe they could pay some money towards a bit of land or a bit of building those concrete blocks in the colony of Vedanta, in Vedanta Nagar. But where are the villages? So here they are. I'm going to read them because I think it's symbolically important to remember those names. So it's Jagannathpur, Turiguda, Sindabaili, Kotaduar, Kopaguda, Banduguda, Belamba, Kinari, Borvata, Rangapali, Bandel, Kenduguda. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it too well. It's not my language, but I'm trying my best. So here are the sources. If anyone is interested, I could point them to the sources where they could find the list of those villages. And the people are still around. People are displaced, basically. They're internally displaced people in Orissa. Now, what can we see from satellite images? The first observation of building the site of the refinery in Lanjigar start to be visible from the end of 2004. So the image on the left, you can see the scar on the ground of where the refinery would be. So it already tells us some story here. When we move to the beginning of 2005, the sky is becoming a bit more visible. There are less clouds, the image is more clear, and you can see a little bit of the airstrip. So this is a road that has been there ever since, leading to Lanjigar village, or town. This is a new airstrip built by Vedanta, and that's the beginning of the refinery compound, where those villages used to stand. And you can still observe some of the, probably the village forest that was cut down. So 58 hectares of forest were cut down in the process. Now, one way of understanding a landscape is taking those satellite images, producing a special type of composition of, they call bands of those, as I said, red, infrared, and green or other layers of color scan images for different eras or different ages. And in order to be a bit more methodical, it's good to have them consistent. So I was trying to get them every 5 years at the end, sorry, at the end of the year. Obviously, there's an impact of cloud cover, availability of images. You don't always get what you want, basically. Here, the first image is from January 2001. All the rest are from December of those years. And what we can see here in pink, effectively, are areas with low vegetation, and in green, areas of high vegetation. Now, we usually in GIS measure it with an index called Ndvi. So it's the normalized difference vegetation index. And I've been using 3 different satellites, Landsat 5, 7, and 8. And the values, so everything in pink is the lower value up to 0.5 NDVI or 0.500, because that's how the units are. And the green areas are values between 0.500 to 1. And you can see that there are differences between the years. What is really striking, for me at least, and I would like to convince you, this striking image is to see the airstrip here and the compound in 2005. So if I just go back to those images, the thing that we see on these images in color are actually proven with the low vegetation index in pink in the compound of those of the refinery. Now, as we proceed in 2010, refinery got into full production. We can see the airstrip already fully operational. We can see some tailing ponds, and we can see the site of the refinery and a few more deposit areas of bauxite. The interesting thing happens after 2010. In 2015, we can see more green on the compound. And this is maybe just to preempt the future slides, there's a mystery there that I will try to share with you. Another interesting way of looking at a landscape is using products of satellite images, and this one was produced by NASA, and it's called GFCC, Global Forest Change Cover. So from the global map, I cropped the area that we were studying. Now, maybe I didn't emphasize it well, but this area at the bottom of an image of the images is the top of Nyamgiri. The Langiga refinery would be here, and what we're seeing here is the tree cover percentage of those images. And as we can see, or I can tell you that there was a change between the year 2000 and the fourth image, the year 2015. And you can see it on the map. It's been put into a spreadsheet, and I did some statistics over to check the changes, basically. Usually there are different definitions of what is a forest, basically, and there are values of any 10% tree cover of a square of a hectare would be considered a forest. Others say that 30%. I went for the 30%. I thought it's a bit more kind of rigorous to get a higher tree cover. And I'll share with you the changes. Or in fact, if you look at the slide above, you can see that in between 2000 and 2005, when the refinery was built, there was a drop of 0.8 kilometers square, which are 80 hectares of tree cover. So between this image on the left, far left-hand side, the first image, and the second left, when the refinery was built and the village forest was cut, we can see a change in the forest cover, which in some way we expected to be seen. And it is documented on those products, the GFCC, if anyone is interested. This is a tabulated form of the same information with some more interesting finding that there is a correlation between the amount of land that we have with high vegetation cover and high precipitation. So precipitation on the right-hand side, rainfall, was growing from 2001, that was an average 1,137 millimeter a year, up to 1,500 and more in 2015. And there is a correlation between this process and the process of the Landsat, those images that I've showed you of the pink and the green, of how much area is showing high vegetation cover and health. So vegetation health is correlated to the amount of rain we had. Another interesting fact, now, sometimes when you're a novice, like I am to GIS, because you take kind of the great and the good and you check if they were right. And I came across a few studies of Odisha that telling us that there was no change in rainfall. And my research of this little area showed that there was actually a rise of an average of 100 millimeters per year between 73 and 2020. So there was, I think it's 100 millimeters is quite a lot. Sorry, it's not, I'm not talking about a year, I'm talking about May, June, July, August, and September that are the pre-monsoon and the monsoon season. And in Odisha, it's 80% of the rainfall, of annual rainfall. So it's quite a significant amount of change. Another way of showing that change in rainfall, in my view, is a bit more telling about the link between rainfall and the refinery. I basically took the whole period from 1973 to 2020 and divided it into epochs. You can see it at the bottom right-hand side of the slide. So the first epoch is the whole period, 48 years. The second epoch is up to 2002, before any construction, pre-construction of the site. From 2003, permission to cut down forest was given and acted on. Until 2020, it's 18 years of operation of the refinery. And then there was a sub-period, because we are told from literature that the refinery became operational, fully operational in 2008-9. And I said, okay, let's check the period that the refinery is in full production. The interesting thing is, and let's just look at the mean, so the average rainfall. When we are checking the period before construction started, we get 114 millimeters a month in average. When we check the period of the full production, we get 128 millimeter per month in average. Now, if you take the difference and multiply it in 12, you get quite a substantial rise in precipitation, which is an important thing, you know, in an arid area, where the high level of precipitation is increased, is important, and it's a change. But is it the change that we were expecting? The same temperature, the same phenomena happens with temperatures. Again, in the period before construction, and let's look at the mean temperature, we got an average temperature of 30.2 centigrades annually. When we are checking the period of full production, we get 30.5. So there's a difference of 0.5 degrees, sorry, 0.3 degrees. And it's quite significant if you think of the amount of time that passed between 2002 and 2020. So are we looking here at something that is a local climate, the refinery being built, or are we looking at a wider phenomenon of climate change affecting a local area? And this is something that we need to further study, but at least we can show here, at least statistically, a link between the periods of construction. Okay, this is the first part of my presentation to you. And I'm going to move now to a second part that is more about the philosophical, social, anthropological, historical element, environmental history element of environmentalism in general, and the Vedanta refinery in Lanjigar and Niamgiri in particular. So Herbert Marcuse, a philosopher from the Frankfurt School, was operating in Germany and escaped the Nazis to America, was talking in his 1964 book, One-Dimensional Man, about the irrationality of our rational world. So as much as we expand our technological exploitation of nature in a rational manner, the sum total is irrational. And I think that it tells a lot about this the drive for industrial development anywhere. I want to refer here to an artist, an activist called Guy Debord, a French activist and artist, that started a group called the Situationist International. And he wrote in 1971 a little pamphlet called The Sick Planet. And in The Sick Planet, he says at the end, the rate of production of non-life has risen continually on its linear and cumulative course. A final threshold having just been passed in this progression, now produced directly, is death. So could someone see if they can lower the volume? Thank you. So basically, we're talking here about the production of death as the product of humanity's strive for industrial development. And he's talking about it in 1971, about pollution. I'm going to talk about pollution because pollution is political, as we said in Foil Vedanta. And pollution is political also when we remind ourselves of Lawrence Summers, that was then the chief economist of the World Bank, that sent this memo in 1991 and justified dropping all the scrap material of the industrial world in the developing world, because the standards there are different and they allow those things to happen. And it doesn't matter so much because the cost of pollution is justifying that operation. And it's a very, very famous letter if you ever want to look it up. It's called Let Them Eat Pollution. So if you Google Let Them Eat Pollution, Lawrence Summers, you will get to that letter, this extraordinary and enraging statement. On the right-hand side, you see the list of the culprit, the CO2 culprits, the top 100 CO2 culprits, and who is at the top of it, if not Vedanta Limited. So, I mean, there is a reason to investigate a certain company. Sometimes you learn quite a lot about environmental justice. As I said, this is not the Niyamgiri, this is in Panchapatmali, also a mountain in Odisha, deforested partly. Basically, when you get to a mining site, to a place that will be mined, you have to cut down the forest, you have to scrape the topsoil that is between 8 meters to, let's say, 30 meters topsoil, and you get to the rock, and then the rock is being excavated. It looks like a moonscape, basically. It looks empty, vast, empty space. The rock has to be brought into a crusher. So this conveyor belt on the bottom right is a conveyor belt from the mining site to the crusher. And from the crusher, it's been liquidized and brought into the refinery where it is going to be produced into alumina. And then the alumina is going to be produced into aluminium. All this, all in all, means that 6 tons of bauxite, of the ore, the bauxite ore of the natural material, turn into 1 ton aluminium, producing all this waste in the way. And the waste is toxic, is radioactive, is destructive. It has to be stored somewhere. It's really, really a terrible scar on the landscape, the mining and the post-mining. Now, I don't know if I had it in the slide. There was a very, very good description of an elder from the area, stated, and I'm looking for the statement I quoted in my work, about the skin disease that affects those people that are living there. And the skin disease is caused by flying ash, it's caused by the dust, there's a noise pollution, so it's not just the mining. So here it is, it's a statement from an Adivasi elder in 2002, Vim Maji. The summer is very hot already. It will get worse if starlight, which is Vedanta, it's another name of Vedanta. If starlight comes, you won't get rain then. And local communities complain about increase in respiratory and skin illnesses. So it's not just the scar on the landscape, it's also the externalities that are associated with this, that are the health of the population. Now, why does it all matter? What is the result of all this destruction? So in an article in the New York Times, there were these photographs of warehouses in Detroit that are storing those aluminum slabs. And those aluminum slabs are moved from one warehouse to another according to the buyer. But basically all this huge destruction in the site of production, that is Niamgiri, Lanjiga, and other places, Korba, Chhattisgarh, you name it, end up in a warehouse in Detroit that some asset company, at the time it used to be Goldman Sachs that owned these warehouses, and then they sold it on, just got money from those big piles of aluminum sitting there, or moving from one warehouse to another. This was buying some aluminum. So much so that the companies producing actual products of aluminum complain, like Coca-Cola, complain that they cannot get aluminum in time because of this kind of manipulation of the financial value of aluminum. Now, I just got myself updated. Spoke to Samarendra Das this morning. The price of aluminum is $3,236 per ton. It's a very, very, very profitable business now. Half of it is production cost, so it still requires a lot of profit. And I think we should remember that we are talking about big industrial operation with global financial impact. Now, how does it look like? I mean, we're coming back now to academia. Now, part of my slide is a bit hidden. What I'm showing you here is basically on the left-hand side is a seminar in the British Academy that is called What is Effective Climate Justice? And we're talking about climate justice. And here's the British Academy talking about climate justice. Great. And the speakers are a chair of the Inuit community, a Namibian speaker. But who is the chair of that talk? His name is Professor Paul Akins, and he's the director of the UCL Institute for Sustainable Resources. So you go now to the next page on the right-hand side, to the UCL website, and see what is this Institute for Sustainable Resources. Maybe we want to be part of a sustainable resource place. And then you see the funders, and you can see that the biggest mining company, BHP Billiton, gave $5 million over the first 5 years of this institute. So the mining companies know exactly what they are doing. They invest money in academia in order to produce something. They don't just give money for nothing. And maybe at the discussion would explore those reasons, maybe from historical, anthropological, sociological point of view. But you got the information here. So this is informed-based activism, is to go into those institutions and do some, what in art is called institutional critique, and produce an art piece on it or another piece and ask the question. A completely different form of art form is this sort of street theater in the AGM of Vedanta. Few actors, activists decided they're gonna visualize what does it mean to mine and cause destruction and death. And they poured red paint, and it was a big picture that was in many newspapers. So you can convey message that is instant by an artistic gesture that is not violent. And I must admit and emphasize that our operations are non-violent at all, because we feel that we have much more power in this way. Another way of forging those links with communities, Foil Vedanta would travel to the site of intervention, take part, report back from events, take our banners that were used in London and use them in India in those momentous weeks of the Padayatra, of the campaigning leading up to the referendum to reject the mining of the Nyamgiri. So there's a visual kind of link here of those sentimental solidarity operations. I promise you to finish up with this photograph. It's originally given to us as a color photograph, and I think that you can see a lot that we can learn from in this photograph. You can see an organized group of women marching. It's from 2014. You can see a young woman, definitely part of that group, holding a mobile phone. So basically, I'm going to report what's going on here. I'm going to take my fate. I'm going to carry it onwards. And I think it's a really, really strong photograph that is inspiring us in our work. So I'm going to finish now. I think I more or less had my 45 minutes talk, and I'll be open for your questions. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very enlightening and very wonderful information given on Nyamgiri, particular the movement we have been working on so far, not less than 26 and 27 years, the struggle going on. It's one of the, you talked about Dongri Akand, one of the most primitive tribe group of this planet, and they are facing a lot of troubles in many ways from state, from this civil society's point of view, and also this is a very wonderful crisis you have been highlighted through your presentation. It's very wholeheartedly supported by this civil society group and transnational agencies in terms of particular, though I wish to mention here Felix and Samarendra Das, P. Sainath, Amitabh Abhiskar, many intellectuals across the country, they participated in this particular program and this joint venture, as well as these leaders, those are working on this minority community. And you rightly mentioned, I quote here, the Frankfurtian schools, the Habermas theory, when we are talked about public sphere and voice puberty, these communities' voice always, rightly mentioned by Habermas, content, community, or contest. These all three are very important in this counter to C, the whole quote unquote big C, the corporates. And in today's modernity and contemporary world, we have been witnessed how corporate people are doing so many criminalities and neglecting this particular time of when we should think seriously about the global perspective, how to sincerely look seriously among these communities and within this community and working with them, not on them. And you rightly mentioned through your entire presentation how to engaging the idea of corporate loot in Odisha, particularly the southern part of Odisha. You talked about Kalahandi as well and Rayagada. These two districts, one of the most primitive tribe groups are living in the global south part of Odisha. And then you rightly mentioned about the more than 73 lakhs tons, the bauxites are plentifully available in particular these regions. I will add more information through your presentation. You talked about the entire holistic approach of this democratical struggle between state and the Dangriya community. Here is the two rivers back to back. One is Nagabali and another is Vansadhara, the two lifelines of southern part of Odisha. And as well, these 167 numbers of streams back to back, one to another. These are more efficiency, try to drag out the entire irrigation system of the southern part of Odisha. And numbers of trees, botanical garden, if I'm not wrong, the botanical garden you are showing, the Niyam Raja, what you call the Niyamgiri Hill. It's out of 4,000 numbers of botanical gardens. Out of we are doing botanical university there, we are planning to suppose extractivism of mining ores. What kind of mentality we have? And how far is concerned our BA pass IS officer, quote unquote BA pass IS officer, these administrators, those not even a single minute of any kind of discourse with this particular minority or particular these tribal communities. They always try to impose on their policies on them. This is not good enough. And when we are living in the Anthropocene era, in particular 21st century's globe, it's we witness the modernity always challenging through the living agencies. I'm not talking about the men here, and you also presented, and you are not talking about the men here or the women participate particular in the movement here. I am talking and I am raising the voices over the non-living agencies. What about the trees? What about the animals? Those are living in the forest areas, in particular this elephant corridor, and also the corridor itself belongs to the tiger corridor. These are our 21st century's major challenges. We have to answer it. And the questioning democracy, the questioning development through political economy or through vibrancy of this corporate authoritarianship. Thank you so much, sir. It's really an enlightened session. And you have raised so many interesting versions of question. I would perhaps, in other ways, I would like to inform you through your fantastic presentation. And it's really, thank you so much from core of my bottom heart. And also numbers of questions raised by the participants. I would like to invite Rudunaran to go one after another. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zena, for inviting to running the question answer session. Sir, one question is asked by Dr. Neha Sharma. She's asking, this is very difficult to see all the layers of issues like planetary at the level, then global, and then regional. Many more spatio-temporal differences. How a social scientist do justice to the work, and from what perspective? All are unavoidable, but overlapping the interests. Also, it is going to be more global planetary problem, and regional issues going very marginalized.
I prefer to answer a question one by one, just to remember what was the question. So if I refer to the question of Dr. Sharma, indeed, one of the findings in literature is that there is a lack of breakdown, or not only now they start to break down at least the field of GIS. So this global modeling of climate to regional, local level. And indeed, they are asking for more people, and this is what I'm trying to call you to do. But it's a challenge for you, the participants. Get down to the local level, go to an area and check what are the local changes there. And we need hard data, we need temperature, we need precipitation, we need the type of soil, we need the perennial streams, we need the forest mapping, we need the biodiversity of flora and fauna. Once we get these local dossiers for every region, at least those regions, let's say, starting with the regions that are being mined, so the regions that are problematic in this, that are at the forefront of the ecological conflict, the ecological resource conflict, we can start to map the, let's say, not on the problem, not on a global level, that you get this big modeling, mathematical modeling that misses the detail and the stories of life of those affected. So we want to get the local scale now investigated. But this requires, and this is what I'm trying to work here in the UK, is to build a team of people that are able to take the social aspect, the social sciences, the legal law aspect of it, the environmental law, and you make a little kind of team of experts that takes on a region by region approach. So yeah, thank you for this question. I think it was a point that I forgotten to actually
Sir, one question is from Shubham Das. He's asking, how do you look at the policy paradigms of the third world countries like India in this globalized era, who are forced to frame their policies as per the agenda set by multinational agencies like World Bank, World Trade Organization, and who are also facilitating the developed countries to outsource their most extractive industries to the third world countries, where the environment has been remained a low priority so far as the legislation and policy perspective are concerned.
I think it's a very big question, because when you hear about India, they're talking 52. Well, no, they talk about the global picture. 52% of the world are living in cities. Yes, but 48 are living in rural areas. So who do you address in your policies? And yeah, I understand, and we are all part of that global. Nobody escapes globalization, like nobody escaped COVID. You know, we're all part of it, and we're paying the price. But who's paying more price? You know, some people. Someone gave an example in the past of a pyramid. So at the bottom are us, and at the top are the people that are able to be mobile, financial transaction are free. You know, this is the internal contradiction of capitalism, basically, that is seeking profit on the expense of people's lives. And Dr. Jenner mentioned, and inanimate life as well. So we're talking about the rights of nature and the rights of people. And we need to somehow balance that madness of trying to mine everything that is mineable, so to speak, or anything that could be made into profit. I think it's a matter of value system, you know. And also, we're talking about them living there in Niyamgiri. Actually, when you listen, I don't know if you saw the film that Samarendra and Amarendra Das came out with, Earthworm Company Man. And in that film, there is an interview with some people from villages in Niyamgiri, some basically Dongria. And I think it's the most political statement, very lucid statement of that young man. He says, if they want to mine the Niyamgiri, they oblige us. They need to explain for us what they're going to do with it. Are they going to produce bombs out of aluminium? What are they going to do with the red mud? And he also said, yes, we do want development, but we want schools, we want clinics, you know, maybe we want home care for the elderly of our community. So I think there are different system values, and we need to basically advocate those values. I wouldn't be so naive to think that we're just going to talk and everyone say, yes, we totally agree with you, sir. I would say India is a democratic country, and quite an amazing one, actually, where you are able to go and speak to a minister of the union and explain your cause. And the Minister of the Union would come and hear you in your area. So this happened in the course of the Niyamgiri struggle. But beyond that, let's not talk about the representative, let's talk about the legal system. If we have a team of legal workers and paralegal workers that are gathering evidence and challenging the pollution board, local, regional, and national, if they go and file petitions in the National Green Tribunal in New Delhi, if they take it to the courts in New Delhi, then you start to get a group of young lawyers that are passionate about activism, using their knowledge in link with the community to change the fate of this community. I think this is what we were doing, and this is what we are trying. Basically, we are a bit older. I don't know if you see, cut off our hair is a bit white. It's because we're old. We've been too long doing it, and now we need this knowledge to go around and inspire other people to do it and expand that work, because this is the only way to save us from that destruction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought San had some questions. Over to please, San.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this talk. I mean, this is one of those rare occasions where it's not just academic. The talk is very much loaded with some honesty and inspiring integrity. Okay, there are two things. First, I was wondering, like, some of us might be knowing about your engagement here, but just for the sake of some historicity and storytelling to it, if you may add a little autobiographical note that how, when, and where you got interested in the problem. And after, when you do that, there'll be a follow-up, which is, I mean, one of the very apparent criticisms of relying heavily on GIS would be something about technological determinism, right? And one can argue that since the slides which show the red as the forest or the green coverage actually ignores the other red, which is very much political. So how do we rethink about these, limitations of relying heavily on technology, while we might be ignoring the politics of, resistance, which can be at times ultra, which can be at times non-violent, which can be people's movements. So how do we really incorporate all that? Thank you.
It's an amazing question. I thought that you are all in it because you know it, but I'll definitely expand because it's part of what activism, environmental activism is. I was a farmer. I grew up in Israel, and I was living in this little socialist community, and we grew our own. I mean, I was growing citrus, oranges, and so I know how does it mean to work the land. And I planted trees, and I'm really committed to it. I'm doing it here in the UK as well, now with apples. And out of this link of working on the land, you get a sense that actually it's not so complicated. And a lot of people that are telling you things don't understand anything about your life, about the reality of what does it mean to be digging a ditch? What does it mean to plant a tree? What does it mean to pick the fruit? And of course, I mean, we talk about the Frankfurt School. So this being removed from the land, from our existence that is based on the direct interaction with nature, and more mediated. We now go and buy our food in the supermarket if we live in towns, or we eat cooked food that is brought to us in a restaurant. So a lot of our life is being mediated through many, many, many agents. And in this respect, let's call it the Anthropocene. So the era of the anthropos, of the human, produced a lot of technological ways to deal with how do we feed ourselves, how do we keep ourselves alive, how we keep ourselves covered. There is a critique of the Anthropocene, and I totally agree that the term and the technology were created, and GIS was created in favor of mining companies. This is one of the critique towards in my literature that I came across, is that most of the work of GIS is geological exploration of petroleum, of different minerals. And definitely there is a space here to reclaim technology. I mean, nobody said that, steel can produce a tank, but steel can also produce a tractor. And maybe we don't need a tractor, maybe it's enough not to plow, because now there's a no digging method that is being advocated. So a lot of the work, the hard kind of technological work that is kind of advocated by, call it Anthropocene, high capital, late capitalism, techno-capitalism, you know, developed world, industrially developed world, are things that maybe we need to put a cap on for a while and ask ourselves, how much of it do we actually need? And what for? So we know now that we can feed the whole world because a lot of food is being thrown away. We know now that, you know, increasing consumption in China and India would be leading in the same way that the Western world is doing it, is first of all, it's wrong in terms of values. Why would you consume if you don't need something? Why would you produce too much if you don't use it? So maybe there's a better way of production that is more communal based or more local based. I don't know. I don't have the solutions. I know that in communities that I live that are smaller ones, people are thinking, okay, do we need color TV? I remember in my place, in my village, because we lived communally, we had to decide, are we going to buy color TVs for the population, or are we going to send more people for higher education? And the decision was to send to higher education. So you do your decision, you know, everyone, of course, it's an individual, but it's also a collective. And I think what we are arguing here is for, and you spoken about people's movement, political kind of struggle. We're talking about collective political action that is definitely missing. And I remember that when we started Foil Vedanta was there. So back in 2004, when Samarendra Das and Felix Padel were talking about Odisha and the case of Nyamgiri, they were talking about it in the European Social Forum. It was part of the World Social Forum that was once or twice meeting in Mumbai. So there was a global platform that coordinated political work of all the, I don't know how to call it, all the people that don't think the world is run well. And they were able to meet once a year, once in 2 years, have conversations and have a plan of action. And the whole global movement against the war in Iraq grew out of that operation. Since the crisis of 2008, the financial crisis, I think there was a bit of a decline, and we don't have now a global movement that is a social movement. They are disparate, you know, they're divided in their countries and the two local. And I think there is a project now to build a national and a global platform of environmental activism, environmental justice activism. So definitely, I think it's definitely the only way, basically, to achieve something is if the people that are suffering, the majority of people that are suffering from those industrial developments, destructive industrial practices, come together and say, no, we want some industrial development. We don't want too much of it, and we don't want it there. You know, this kind of conversations on a community, global and local level, rather than the global powers and the biggest industrial financial operators deciding for everyone else what will happen. It's anti-democratic, actually. You know, if we're talking about democracy, let's put it on the table. Democracy is if every person has a right to express what they would like to see as their well-being and the good outcome, including people that are living in forests. So I don't know if it's this is my response to the points that you raised, Sharon. No, thank you. It was really important subject. I would actually throw it back to the audience. You tell us, how do you think that you could engage with the political action? I can tell you that we did it by going to the villages, meeting people, having a Zoom, not Zoom, it was a Skype calls, you know, interaction. You interact, you bring what you took out of the area back to the village. You know, my dream is to take this lecture and talk about it in the Nyamgiri. You know, why only in Delhi? Let's take the talk there. So maybe you need to do your work of going out. I don't have a lot of knowledge of your system and networks. And I'm sure I know that there is a tradition, because I saw it when I was there, of people from political parties actually going and living in small places and doing political work that is also human interaction. So get your knowledge down to the area. That would definitely change things.
Thank you, Professor Zuky, for a very honest answer. Now I would like to invite any other participants who want to ask questions. If okay, so the last question I thought from my side, sir, how do you look at the academia activism relationship to protect the nature, culture, and identity, to protect the nature, culture, and identity of marginalized sections of our society, whose lives are getting devastated by the extractive capitalism in this neo-colonial, neo-imperial model of development?
I think I was partly talking about the links between knowledge, democratization of knowledge, get the knowledge out from the ivory tower of university into schools. And I'll give you an example. The work we do in Sussex, and I didn't mention, but back in 2013, Professor Vinita Damodaran, that is an environmental historian in the University of Sussex, generously invited us to start a forum, and that will bring together people that are activists and people that are in academia, because both are frustrated. Academics produce a lot of knowledge, but the only way that they can disseminate it is through lectures and journals. It doesn't actually get to work in the world, or some of it doesn't get, let's say some parts of it, and they don't get sponsorship to do the thing that they want. They get sponsorship to do kind of string attached to the research. Activists, such as Samarendra Das and Felix Padel, produced a book that is probably the textbook about the history of aluminium. I mean, it's an amazing. I really encourage you to try and get it. It's in Black Swan. I'm saying I haven't written it, so I can, recommend it. And this huge amount, this knowledge was read by then the Interior Ministry of India. So how come that two people that are not in academia produced such an invaluable document? So there was a need to bring activist knowledge and university knowledge together. And I didn't say anything yet about indigenous knowledge. How do you know about the plants on the Nyamgiri if you don't go to speak to people that are living there? What do you know about their life? I mean, you're an anthropologist, you come in and observe, okay, but have you actually spoken to them? Have you shared your research with them? Have you brought it back to the community? This, I call it democratization of knowledge, the sharing, the interaction. This is really, really an important part, and you need to create a framework for it. It doesn't just happen. Someone needs to have resources, work on it, organize the talks. Now, I always think that any audience is a good audience. As an artist, the gallery audience shared my themes. I could talk to them about environmental issues. That's why I mentioned the art camp. This is one way of doing it. So you organize a period that a group of artists are coming together with a village and are talking about an issue to do with that place. It could be anyway, it could be in a neighborhood in Delhi. I don't know which place you would choose to do it. It could be out in the rural area of one of the countries in India. It could be near a mining site. And you let the people express themselves, produce some works. They show you what is important for them. The example from the Sundarbans was, when we had the conversation, is when the villages are inundated in the cyclone time, they either try to save animals because that's the livelihood of the family, and some of them are trying to get the roof of the house that is made of timber, because that's a very valuable thing. So people try to save the timber of the house. So you start to learn, if you start to ask people questions, people that are living there, you start to understand how they live and what is important for them. And I think this intervention is our duty as people that are educated and had the privilege of being in the centers, decentralizing that. So that's another, an art camp, an activist and academia forum, such as the one in Sussex that I mentioned. Oh, and then going and producing films. You could produce your knowledge through a visual communication is very, very strong. You can always talk and show images. You can make weaving of maps, and you can, there's a project of weaving in the Niamgir, weaving with villages and producing product that are then sale of them bring profit to the local community. So you're doing all kind of operations that are involving the local with the global. Yeah, so I hope that it gave a little bit of information.
Thank you. Dr. Jana, do you want?
Yes. Okay. I have few questions if your time permits.
What do you mean?
Sir, if your time permits, then I have few questions for you, sir.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally free. No.
Oh, fantastic, sir. Great. Thank you. Sir, what about ideas about global solidarity in terms of these particular movements, when one movement to another movement? If I'm not wrong, the particular anti-globalization movement started in 1993 in Kasipur, Raigada district, when 3 people died in Manikan's village. I think you must visited there once with Samran and Felix. Sir, what is your ideas about these global nexus theories in terms of developmental politics agenda of the state, as well as these binary funding agencies, rightly about World Bank, IMF, and this World Economic Forum also, and ADB, and WTO and WHO? What is your ideas in terms of these big players? How to operate this particular anti-globalized movement, or we can say it anti-mining movements, to save and protect the nature, culture, and identity? And why not even today's world, in terms of 21st century's world, when we are very pioneering and very expected audience kind of global village concept developed day by day, the global displacement policy not spell it out yet today. One of the most major challenges for the third world countries is concerned. These are very vibrant question, everybody should think seriously about these issues and holistic agenda of these human agencies. What is your idea, sir? And what is your suggestions for these grassrooted workers and these activists and these particular, those are participating in movements, and these local villagers and organizations leaders, those are protest against anti-mining industry, or you can call it the anti-corporate agencies? What is your idea, sir?
Thank you. The way that I came into activism after 2000 was through critique of corporate power. And as I said, as I mentioned, I mean, as far as I remember, my historic experience was that in 1999, a few people stood in front of the World Bank Center in America and started the anti-globalization movement, basically. And a few years later, when I came to England, I just stumbled into it, so to speak, and there is space for this global link. But what does it mean global? It's a link between people and between movements. So when I was talking about collective political action, I was talking about, first of all, organized on a local level and on a national level, but of course have exchange with external players in other parts of the world. And we did it, it sounds a bit, again, naive and smaller scale, but the school in Sunderban produce artworks, and they send them to a school in Ecuador that produce also their artworks, and they exchange artworks, and both schools send it to the UK, to a third school, and the children reacted and started to communicate with these 3 different schools in 3 different continents. So if it's possible on the level of schools, it's definitely possible on the level of politics. One of my experiences was going to, I mean, maybe the incident that you mentioned, there was in 2000 a terrible police killing in Kuchupadar of 3 Adivasis, and I actually have here, I'll just go back and get the poster. So this poster, I don't know if you can see it. This poster came from Kuchupadar. Can you see it?
Yes, yes, sir, yes.
And the
Sir,
event
these 3 people worshipped in Kuchipadar.
Yeah, they were killed by police.
Mm-hmm.
They were protesting against the mining and the police shot. And we traveled in 2004. I traveled to the commemoration, and the interesting thing, I remember the conversations in the convoy, because we were stopped. We were stopped in a place called Tikiri on the way to Kuchupada. We never arrived, basically, because they were, for our protection, we're kept in a police station. We're not allowed to proceed. Anyway, the interesting thing was there was a lot of political conversation in this convoy. And the political conversation was how to turn the movement into an effective movement without resourcing into violence that will give the state permission for repression. It was a very, very delicate act. There were 19 different political groupings there in the convoy, and they all agreed on a platform that enabled the movement to proceed in a non-violent action. And I think that this is really important. It's not that we are not active, it's not that we are not going to stand there, but I think I had some exchange about fight to the death. I think we need our activists alive, because it's a long-term, it's a very long journey. And in order to achieve our goals, we need to be active for many, many years. I'm not saying to capitulate to comfortable life. I'm saying keep on doing what you're doing, but for as long as you can. And with the widest platform that you can create. Because this is what happened with the social forum. You know, I'm not a religious person, but I was marching with people from all kind of Christian affiliations. I wasn't a green at the time, and I was marching with green people, you know, environmental people. I became environmentalist after visiting India. I think that in India, you have a great tradition of the national movement. You have a lot of environmental activists. You have people that are living life in forest and communities that are ready to protect their livelihood. And you got people's movements that are unbelievably potent and powerful and inspirational as well. And they tell you what the politics is. And the politics is, we're going to stay there, we're going to do it in this way, and we're going to communicate with the wider world and explain what we're doing. I think it's an the imagination is directed towards how do we develop that project into a collective political action. And of course that, you know, in academia, it's not very good to talk politics, but, you know, you cannot not engage with the political realm. If you want to influence it, you need to influence the policymakers. You need to take them to the villages, you need to take them to the areas to show them what's happening. And also that there is maybe an economic alternative or economic model that is not extractivism. In the end of the day, as far as I know, in extractivism, the people that profit most are the companies. You know, how many jobs were created in the Niyamgiri area? And what kind of job? Who wants to work in a crushing plant? Who wants to work, you know, yeah, it's terrible, you know, it's a terrible prospect. So I think that it's a more holistic, you know, it's a much wider conversation of what are the life we want, what are the value systems we support, what are the jobs, what are the day-to-day jobs or works that we want to engage with, how do we bring social services that we all want, like healthcare, like education, why can't it be done in other places? This needs to talk, you need to talk to policymakers for achieving these things. And if they don't listen, you go in front of their office and you just stand there until they listen to you. I think that it's really important that the conversation remains a non-lethal conversation. So you don't want to have 1,000 people standing in front of 1,000 soldiers because we know who is going to win the battle. They have weapons, we don't. We have conviction and we have justice. And I think in the end of the day, we also have the numbers. And democracy is about the good for the majority of people. So, yeah, I'm all in favor of, I wish I could see it here, but I think we're in a bit of a lull in terms of political action. I don't know if it was the same in India. Up until the pandemic, the biggest actors in the environmental movement were children. There were children every last Friday of the month going out of schools into the streets and blocking the city, at least in Brighton. And I think they did it in other parts of the world. And it really highlighted the environmental issue. Then came the pandemic and suddenly environmentalism became the cause of the Conservative Party in Parliament, and capitalism, green capitalism suddenly is the savior of environmental disaster. So, you know, it's interesting that school children were leading on it. So maybe this is where the hope is. I don't know. I mean, it's really, I mean, you're giving us, you can give the answer as best as I give, you know, because you know your community better.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, this is the last question perhaps for you for today's session before we'll go to wind up. Sir, what is your ideas on Indian democracy is concerned? 1991, the LPG imposed on us through the pressurized of this World Bank and IMF and World Economic Forum, 3 back-to-back pioneering agencies composed to impose on us the LPG. And next year, 1993, the most quote-unquote landmark era for Indian democratical system or practices, that is called NNP, National Mining Policy. That was the major chunk for these tribal areas particular. And how you look as a serious activist of 21st century's globe in terms of working particular this community engagement and their solidarity as a whole. If you look Mandata, you look Somarendra Das, you look Somarendra Felix, and you, even Maria, and numbers of people, I can still remember numbers of people are working to the global solidarity as a whole. How Indian academia should not or be beyond imagination to think forward, how to protect the nature, culture, and these identity first, the community-based programs. Why not they should teach in university level and they always ignore the voices of activists. And even the activism part also not spell it correctly through the academia world. Even academia not serious for all these issues. These are the major issues for highlight everyday life. Every student should learn what is actual the mean for activism means. And when people are doing and engaging some ideas in terms of this Foucault's ideas, this specificity of intellectualism, this public intellectualism, and this quote unquote so-called, those are wearing blazers in my wards in universities, and they are serving as a professor, and even more, even vice chancellor. What kind of deliberation they have did for the society in terms of macro framework kind of work. And last but not least, these particular specific intellectuals, those are, sacrifice their lives for their community engagement and save their identity. Sir, what is your suggestions to particular the universities as concerned in Indian education system?
I don't know so much. I know that it's very vibrant, and I don't have a view as an institutional academic because I'm not. I was a student. I'm working alongside academia. I'm not part of the academic mechanism. So in some way, I got a bit more freedom probably to speak my heart and my mind without needing constantly to look to the side and see who is with me. I think we just need to persevere because, there will always be people and organizations who will try to, flood us with money and dominate the conversation. But, and maybe we are a minority, but if we are consistent enough and we are strategic enough and we identify the right people to address and call them to answer us. I remember taking this book about the aluminium to the FCA, which is the regulatory organization in England, or that supervises the stock exchange. And we told them, look, you have a company that is listed on your stock exchange and is doing not the best activities, it's not doing legal, it's not working legally, and you're giving them your cover. In 2018, we believe that the delisting of Vedanta in 2018 was partly because we pressurized the organization that supervises, that tells what to do in the London Stock Exchange. So maybe this is what we need to do to get direct link with the people in power that are deciding things and hold them to account. In the end of the day, the vice chancellor of a university, in some ways, working for us. I mean, let's not mix it. I mean, if there is no lecturers and no students, there is no university. If there is no vice chancellor, there is still a university. So, in reality, we know that the way that the world is organized, it's top down and it's a pyramid structure, and we know how capitalism works and how society works. But there is an argument for a diffused, decentralized, horizontal landscape of knowledge, of authority, of doing projects in smaller groups that are then reporting to larger groups. And we know that things are working. I mean, if you look into a tribal, and this is not something I research, I just heard it from anthropologists. If you go to a tribal village, you will see a democratic system in operation. This is what I heard. So maybe we should go there and see how they do things and get inspired by the way that they organize their lives, and see how we can organize our intellectual academic research agenda. I also believe I saw that there was a little bit matter of hierarchy between top academic and the student at least in India, also here in the UK. And one of the principles of the forum in Sussex was we bring everyone together, student and lecturer. They all have they all sit around the table, They all speak, they all ask questions, they have statements to say. So by creating a horizontal and inclusive conversation, you open it up as a democratic forum. And this is the way that I know how to do things. And on a global level, yeah, you are right to say, yeah, there are big organizations, you know, there's the big US army, there's the big China army. I mean, we can't, you know, we are people. We do what we can, and within what we can, there's quite a lot of freedom. And I think if we persevere and use our freedom in an intelligent and honest way, we can definitely achieve things. And I think we showed it with Foil Vedanta. It was unimaginable. I remember in 2004, we were talking about if we only saved the Niamgiri, we did the work of our lives. In 2014, it has been achieved. And 4 years later, there was a case in Zambia, again, connected to Vedanta with copper. And pollution became political there. Pollution mobilized workers, trade unions, civil society. And now everyone in Zambia knows copper is an asset that belongs to the Zambians and not to a corporation in London that is incidentally headed by an Indian person. So I think it's really important to use knowledge strategically, and the ambition should be let's dismantle power. It doesn't need to be the state has rules. If the company is not abiding by the rules, there are enough tools to activate and make it do the things. If it's using its asset, its money, in a bad way, it needs to be pointed at. If it's exporting more iron ore from Goa, I don't know, they were permitted to export a certain amount, export 150 million ton iron ore, then they exceeded their permitted level of export, and they need to be brought, you know, to answer for it. If they pollute in Tuticorin, you know, the copper smelter there that has to be shut because people have been poisoned for 20 years now, and the police is shooting 12 protesters in 2018. Do you remember? 22nd of May 2018, the police shot 12 protesters in Tuticorin. You know, what did they want? They didn't want to be poisoned by a copper smelter in their town. Is this not a reasonable demand? So I think against repression, you know, you cannot but show your body, but I think there's more things to do than just to be a martyr. And it's not, if we go all the way, we're just going to be killed. No, if you go all the way and you speak to the people that are in power, sometimes there are changes, you know. Sometimes there's a Forest Rights Act of 2006. Sometimes there is a Supreme Court ruling that stops the mining of Niamgiri. Sometimes there's a Supreme Court in the UK, in London, that, you know, Zambia farmers have to be compensated by Vedanta. So, you know, there are ways to achieve things. And I don't say that I'm not the person that is an expert on it, but I've seen it happening. So if it happened here, it could happen elsewhere as well. So yeah, I think there is hope. We shouldn't really succumb to the darkness.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
You have an amazing country. You have an amazing democratic spirit in a lot of parts of Indian society, and they should be mobilized and be filled with hope. I'm very inspired by what I see in India.
Okay, thank you. Fantastic, sir. And thank you so much for giving us so many informations related to this particular movement. Entire globe is now watching, sir. Sir, what kind of methodology to deal with when we are going to mapping these movements particular, and how to collect data in terms of, because numbers of PhD scholars are watching you now particular. What is the conducting of data and how to deal with data in terms of mapping movements?
So when it happens, it happens. I mean, when you go to the social forum, how do they know what is the mailing list to connect to all these groups? They knew somehow because, I mean, I don't want to, it's a matter of strategy and efficient, I guess, networking and communication to make the links and working links with organization and get to meet them and speak to them and bring them to one place and see what are the real interests are. You know, if there is a need for healthcare in a village, it's probably not only in one village, and you could have a whole network of villages that need to protect their water or their clinics, demand their clinics or demand their kindergartens, or, you know, or the care for the elderly. I can give you an example that is recent and is very inspiring, and is in Australia. I don't know how many people are familiar with Aboriginal art, but turns out that this art is a reflection of indigenous knowledge of the landscape, and probably tens of thousands of years of telling these song lines, those stories of landscape, integrated and transferred this knowledge from generation to generation. Now in 1980s and 90s, they started to gather those last people that still lived indigenous life to tell the stories and to paint the paintings of those maps, of those mental visual maps of song lines of the landscape. And it created a huge body of knowledge that is now touring around the world. And I was privileged to see the exhibition here in England. One thing that really interested me is that some of these people got very, very old. And instead of them dying in towns, they established a care home in the land, in the tribal area. So instead of those elderly dying in a neighborhood in whoever, who knows where, you know, in Bhubaneswar, they managed to end their life in the forest, in their indigenous land, and continue to tell the story. So this is the end of life. Yeah, it's care for the elderly. There's nothing controversial. We all want to care for the elderly. We all want to educate our children well. We all want to be healthy. These are projects that could link a lot of communities together, and you can map. You know, if you map those villages, you could definitely create a movement of people demanding their rights as Indian citizens. You know, they are not less citizens than we are in cities, isn't it? So I think it's down to groundwork to map and link with organizations that have a map and have networks. So it's a network of networks. Just like, I guess, like state works, like capitalism works, we could also work on networks of networks, you know? It's not just a corporation that knows how to do it. But the difference is that the people, let's say the initiative is coming from a wide group of people that are interacting with each other and with communities, and you get things bottom up rather than top down. There were also examples from Cuba. I heard, you know, coming out of the special period in the 90s, they had huge discussions all over the country based on communities, and every community recommended to the center. Oh, it's an amazing process, democratic process of the population actually discussing matters of the state, recommending what to do, and those recommendations coming to the center and implemented later as policies. So this is how bottom up works, you know. Grassroots, this is grassroots. Yeah, how do you turn a protest movement into a movement that builds nation building or society building?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So this is the time we should put forward our hands together to save Newmgiri as well and global solidarity. And this is the time because our center is working for this nature, culture, language, and identity. And our center believes the pandemic is the gift of LPG and the gift of crony capitalist. That's why we're facing the panic wall today. with this note, I will stop here, sir. And thank you so much, although we are connecting from UK. This is now the time for formal vote of thanks. I would like to invite Mr. Rudran Das to go for a formal vote of thanks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zena. Thank you, everyone, to help me to putting this conference together. First of all, my big thanks to our speaker, Zuky Serper, for your very much for your contributions and time. Definitely, you share so many important things, and your ideas, your research is very important to learn as a researcher of the 21st century. I believe all the researchers, all the faculties and students listening, you definitely have some versatile knowledge in the spectrum of environmental movement and climate change as far as concerned. Thank you so much for joining World Human Sciences and Management Conference and sharing your exquisite views with and the plethora of thoughts. Thank you so much for joining with us. And I have to acknowledge the institutional contributions here, in particular, the Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, and Ravenshaw University. And my special thanks to our patrons who are helping us to put this conference together. Professor Sarat Kumar Balita, Professor Mahadev Joysul, and Professor Sanjay Kumar Naik, and our respected conveners, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda and Charudat Panigrahi. And special mentions to Dr. Vikram Kesari Jana, the Director, Indian Institute, the Director, Center of Adivasi Research and Development, Dr. Nupur Patnaik, Shubham Das, San Kashyap, and all people, the members of Center of Adivasi Research and Development, who help us to put in this conference together. Here I would go for some names: Dr. B.C. Das, Dr. Neena Das, and Samuel Lima, Kamal Prasad Mohanty, and Professor Loknath Misra, and Professor Amulya Acharya, Professor Sudarshan Misra. Thank you all for your support and contributions to World Human Sciences and Management Conference. And thank you, Zuky, for these photographs. This was interesting. I want to understand this photo.
Yeah, I don't know if you can read.
This is I thought this is Lakshman Naik. Yeah, thank you all for joining. Yes, it's Lakshman Naik.
Thank you very much. It was very
you.
generous, and we'll be happy to get a kind of a link to the presentation online so we can share it with our people as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you,
us.
and good luck, and let's keep being in touch.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Sure, sir.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward for future engagement, sir.
Yes, definitely. I'm up.
Definitely. And namaste from India, sir. Namaste from India.
Namaste for you. You're doing amazing work. You're better than us. Come on. You're doing so much.
Thank you
so much.
Sir, so nice of you. So kind-hearted words of yours, sir. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Yeah.